Hello and welcome to Shifting Left. This is a brand new content series from AppDynamics for IT people who want to learn faster, build smarter, and innovate more. My name's Adrienne Jack. I'm part of the webinar team here at AppDynamics, and joining me virtually today is my wonderful colleague, Technical Evangelist for AppDynamics, and former startup CTO Marco Coulter, aka the Tech Whisperer. I'm really excited Marco's agreed to lend his expertise to this topic because I feel like it couldn't be more relevant at this time. He earned his nickname, the Tech Whisperer, for his skills in translating business drivers for a technical audience and technical concepts for business leaders. And sure enough, he is a treasure trove of information about business intelligence, and he has that to share with IT and business leaders that have been impacted by the current climate. Welcome, Marco.
G'day, AJ. G'day, everyone. Thanks for having me on. Hope I can meet that description as we go through things. That sounded good.
I want to thank everyone for joining us today, too, from wherever you may be. We really appreciate you jumping on. And before we get started, I'm obligated to share this safe harbor statement. We can pretend I read the whole thing. But just a few more important housekeeping items. So firstly, note that the console you're looking at is completely customizable. Feel free to explore the widgets at the bottom of your screen. You can also move or resize any of the windows you see open by dragging the bottom or top right corners. Also note that webinars are bandwidth intensive, so closing any unnecessary browser tabs will help conserve your bandwidth. If you're still experiencing any issues, though, either with sound or the screen seems frozen or whatever, refreshing your browser usually fixes it. But if not, reach out to us through the Q&A widget and we'll try to help you out. Do feel free to ask Marco questions there, too. We'll answer as many of those as we can at the end of our conversation or offline if we're not able to get to them. But in the meantime, we have lots to talk about. So let's get straight into it, Marco, because it's clear that IT is feeling the pressure in this new digital world where demand is unlike anything we've seen before. We've seen memes like this one, but that's great. Got to find some light in the darkness. But in all seriousness, what's on people's minds right now?
It's an interesting time. I mean, I'd say right now, the first thing that people hit is their immediate needs, and that's of the team and the technology and so on. But I mean, it's also worth understanding where we were before the sort of 2020 pandemic began. At the end of 2019, we were in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. There'd been the first industrial revolution was around water and steam, and that allowed us to mechanize production. And then the second one was electricity that allowed us to mass produce things. The third one sort of came in the 60s and was around digitization. It was when the computers came along. And then the fourth one is sort of an extension of that, but it's actually the expansion of that through the entire globe. And that was around artificial intelligence and machine learning, and Internet of Things, and that allowed us to automate production. It allowed us also, with digitization, we started producing things that weren't products we could hold. And with machine learning and artificial intelligence, we were able to automate the production of those things. So we were right in the middle of a significant global change anyway. And then, of course, the pandemic came along and put a spin on that and has changed, pretty much any company had a digital transformation project going on. They had plans, they had strategies, they were thinking in a few years we'll be here or here. For many of those companies, that has moved into fast forward right now, that it's now about survival rather than a nice strategic objective of how we're going to find growth in the future. Okay,
interesting. So can you tell me what it means that the application is the business? It sounds simple on paper, but for many companies, that's been a challenge as they've tried to navigate this. So what does it mean now when digital is all the more important when it comes to working from home and serving customers, what have you?
So I think the interesting challenge is if we talk about the application as a business, we see that the technology we use these days has changed in the environment. And we've seen that go through the paradigm shifts. We started on mainframes and things like that. And we've seen that, of course, they still exist today, which is the stories around people looking for COBOL programmers. We moved to client server, we moved through web. And right now, we're focusing on cloud and web services as the new infrastructure underneath these applications. And the whole thing was to get the application closer to where the customer lives. And that's where even the conversation around apps sort of came from the smartphones. Now, 10, 13 years ago, we didn't have smartphones. This is a really dramatic change in our environment. And now we're familiar with not just the vendor or the brand that we interact with, but the individual applications that they supply us with. And often that digital experience, that digital touch is the thing that we now associate with the brand. So when you have a bad app experience, that's a taint on the overall brand. And that's why we sort of go, look, the application is the enterprise now. These applications are how customers perceive us as much as they did through storefronts 30 years ago. So I think one of the interesting aspects of that, just following it through, is in the area of what do you do about that? Well, it's about understanding how the applications work.
Okay. And it's about speeding up, right? It's not just about transformation now. So what does that mean for different types of businesses at different stages of maturity, or have like a different response to crises and change?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I think the really interesting aspect of that is how businesses respond to crises. There are, of the companies I've been talking to in the last month, in the midst of this pandemic, they fall into sort of three different categories. So, and I've been, we've all been watching a lot of movies, so I've put them into as movie titles up here, sort of thing. So the first category is sort of Frozen, right? That their circumstance was that, whatever the nature of their business was, it wasn't that they had to dramatically change, but they couldn't risk anything. So I'm talking to, development and infrastructure teams who have been edicted from on high, just freeze everything. Don't change anything, no new features. We don't want you to change anything. We just want it to stay up. And that's the sort of frozen category, that they're not allowed to introduce new features. And the question is, well, what should they do? We'll come back to that in a second. The second category I call castaway. They're the ones who the world changed underneath their feet. And, I'll use a sort of small business example rather than an enterprise example of the local sort of store that used to sell through the storefront and then realized they couldn't allow people into their store anymore. So they had to become digital overnight. Now, in enterprises, you have much the same thing, that, you have large enterprises that were retail operations, and now their entire retail presence is shut. Well, then how quickly can they turn into a digital enterprise? It used to be a sort of supporter of their revenue, significant, but not their main beast. Now it's the only thing they survive on. They're the castaways, the survivors. And it's like, this application has to change into this now. It has to scale up into supporting all of those customers that used to walk into our stores, and it needs to do it now. So they're the sort of castaway group. And then the third one are the sort of group of people who had an automated deployment of applications. They had continuous integration, CI and CD in their environment today. They're pushing out an app updates each week, just like they usually do. And, they're the ones who are responding to the competitive nature of the business. So let's come back to those three categories and talk about what the influence is.
Yeah, definitely.
What can they do?
Yeah, I'm curious what in general can put IT teams on better footing to get through this? Because even just at the beginning of this year, we were already bracing for a lot of uncertainty, given the fast and sporadic nature of business change and thus technology innovation. So now that there's even more uncertainty, how do businesses deal with that in general?
So the interesting thing in terms of that uncertainty is the aspect of investment. The 451 Research did some research in March, so it was sort of in the middle of just recently when we were recording this, and it showed that about 41% of companies were increasing their spending in IT, and only 3% were cutting back in their spending in IT. And what we know about these sorts of crises is that we're looking now at the BCG information, the Boston Consulting Group. They sort of identified the companies that perform both historically and competitively better. 14% of them is because they invest in new growth areas. And that is the change in the three categories that we're talking about here. So for the frozen category of like, you're not allowed to change anything, well, your people might be working from home, but they're still working. And the key there is to focus on the things that you can achieve in that gap. So you want to tune your environment because it's still running in that scenario. You're just facing a feature freeze, so make sure that your production environment is fit and scalable. But then focus on your technical debt. There are things that aren't new features that you might want to clean up. And I think you can ask for volunteers in this almost, of turn to your development organization and go, what is the thing you've wanted to fix? That piece of thing that you've been trying to fix for months and months and months, and we've always said, not important enough, and pushed it aside. Well, now's the time that you can build that code and make it ready for when you are unfrozen and able to go forward. So I think for those people, it's like catch up on, clean your house, clear your tech debt, and it's cross-skilling as well. If you weren't DevOps or CI/CD, now's the time to start that cross-skilling and have people train each other. Have your operators run briefings for your developers, have your developers run briefings for your infrastructure teams so that they can start to understand the challenges there. So that's the frozen category. Then if we step to the castaway category, the survivors, well, let's face it, everybody who is working on that specific task can't do anything else. That's what, it is the survival of the company. There's nothing more important. However, there is a little bit of breathing room there, that it might be that your infrastructure team, or portions of your development team will not be working on that critical task because of the nature of what their skills are. So they can be working on tech debt in their own applications. They can be working on cross-skilling as well. One of the things about this will be what you come out of this as, and I'll come back to that when we talk about some of the benefits here. And then the fast and the furious, you're already CI/CD, you're already building it. Well, they're in the best situation, right? They don't have to rebuild anything. They're in the right place in terms of targeting their market today. And they don't have to freeze anything because they have CI/CD, the testing is automated, the build is automated, they have appropriate monitoring of their production environments, they're immediately understanding the impact of any change they make. So the challenge for them is to work out, okay, You've spent this investment on building the technology so that you can be more agile to respond more quickly. Now you need to go and meet your business people and work out what that competitive advantage will be. Do you have competitors who can't release new features over the next 3 months because they're in the freeze category or the castaway category trying to just survive? Well, in that case, you're in the perfect situation of then work out what is that new feature that you can put in place now and capture more market share right now over these next few months because your competition is simply, just trying to survive. So that's the fast and the furious. So I think for each group, it's a slightly different thing. If you have people who can't code, then tech debt and cross-skilling. We need to come out of this with a much better sort of T-shaped skills at the end of it all. Is that the answer to the question?
Yeah. I think that it's a really good way to think about it, splitting like the roadmap down that way. I guess one huge challenge that all of these companies have in common is just imagining what you want to be when you come out of this. As you were saying earlier, like it's difficult to think strategically about the mysterious forces of innovation shaping our lives. So even then, how do people know that they've arrived at their goals?
So that's a really great question. So this is the 14%. These are the people who are going to accelerate out of this particular curve, right? And these are the ones who, once your immediate needs are met, the first thing you're going to do with any sort of crisis is ensure that your people are safe and ensure that they can be productive. So, people working from home, you make sure they've got the right kit at home so they continue to be functional. Once you're through that, then you're going, okay, well, is it business as usual? Of course it's not. This has been a global change. The entire marketplace has changed. You now need to have your strategists sit down and work out what does the marketplace look like while we're coming out of this sort of dramatic change and into the future. And that's not different for them. They're always looking at the future and working out what the things are. It's just we need them to do it a little bit faster. So imagining what the future would be like, this is about accelerating the digital transformation. So I would challenge people to say, if you were looking at a 2-year plan, consider whether you can do that in 3 months. Are there ways that you can shrink things out of the environment and bring them together so that you can achieve those things within 3 months? And what would you have to do? And if we think of, and again, if we think of what we're asking our governments to do right now, it's exactly that thing. We're asking our governments of, like, normally you would take a long time to test out various drugs and treatments and testing and so on. We want you to, because you've got so many different things going on, but now we want you to focus on one thing and make it shorter. And essentially that's what we have to do in IT. So set yourself a challenge. How would you take that 2-year transformation and make it happen in 3 months if you were allowed to just focus on that one competitive thing, on that one thing that means that when, in the marketplace in 3 months' time, you are now the best solution, the most competitive solution, the most secure solution. The other thing is, if you look at it and go, well, no, there isn't a competitive edge we can get in 3 months. Well, what about a transformation inside the company? What about transforming IT, again, from dev and ops to DevOps, from DevOps to SRE, to site reliability engineering? Those transformations are the things you can be doing and skilling up on now.
So this is probably a good time to sum up. You say there are 3 steps businesses need to take, not just to prepare for change, but to accelerate through it. Can you take us through these?
So again, I think in any dramatic change, no matter what the nature of it, the first thing is to address immediate needs. You need to survive as a company. So that's just, where are your employees? Where are your staff? Are they safe? And then you move to the needs of the company of how is revenue coming in and how is business transacted. So the first one is pretty easy or I shouldn't say it's easy, but it's pretty obvious of addressing your immediate needs. The second one is the interesting one. That's the challenging one. Lots of people just remain in that space of thinking, well, I'll focus on immediate needs until whatever it is, this ends. Whether it's a recession, a depression, a pandemic, whatever the nature of it is, we'll wait till it ends. And then I'll start thinking about the future. No. The companies that do well, that continue to become stronger and stronger and survive these things, they accelerate their strategy. They see the opportunity from the dramatic change that confronts them. And that's what you have to do. When I was talking about shrinking 2 years down to 3 months, that's what I'm talking about, of how do you fast forward the digital transformation. We need the right tools in place. You need to understand what the customer experience is. And that falls into this third one of visualizing the outcome. And there's sort of 2 sides of this. First one is maybe you can do this today. If you have AppDynamics in place and you're observing your customer journey already, then you'll be able to visualize the outcome. We want to change this add this new feature in. Okay, we can see how our funnel works today, and we'll be able to compare that against how it works with the new feature to ensure that we're making things better. This acceleration things means that feedback has to be immediate. You can't wait till the next quarter to see what the quarterly numbers are and then go, oh, it didn't work, or, oh, fantastic, we're better than we expected. Visualizing the outcome of just getting it in your head of this is where we need to be this is the company we want to be in 6 months' time. Now, how do we get there? That's sort of the aspect of visualizing the outcome. And then taking that down a level of just, well, what are the tools and aspects you need to do that? You need the buyer's journey. You need to understand how, whatever the customer is, how they're coming into your environment and traveling through your environment to complete their view of the transaction. So not your view as little silos and things like that, but their experience of the transaction. I can't emphasize enough the importance of being able to see that customer experience. And then the second one is being able to act rapidly. So this sort of in the area of visualizing the outcome of being able to see where in your environment you have your constraints. And this falls into the area of scale. So let's imagine, I was talking about the different types of companies. Imagine you're that third company and the Fast and Furious, and you've developed a new feature and you're now more competitive than you ever were before. And you're now getting, thousands, tens of thousands, additional customers coming in and hitting your application. Well, now you'll have to scale to support that so you don't lose them away again. You don't want to give that advantage that you've worked so hard for back to the competition. So how do you do that? Well, you've got to be able to understand where the constraints in your environment are so you know what to scale. Even for the survival mode, the castaway mode, this is a critical piece of their response as well, that if you're being asked to scale, by default, if you don't understand where the constraints are in your transactions and business transactions, then you're going to have to scale everything. But if you immediately know, well, I know that when I'm sort of experiencing load, that this particular Kubernetes cluster is the one that starts to constrain and slow down the business transactions, or these particular methods being called in this piece of Java code, that's where we start to run into problems, or this SQL call. Once you have a way of understanding that's where the constraint is, you know where to put your investment. You're not going to sort of invest across the board. You know, it's sort of like saying, I don't know, you have a new child come into your house, you don't buy a second house. You just get, you know, you prepare a room for them. And that's what we need to do as enterprises. Probably not the best analogy, but it's still functional sort of thing. It's not bad. So it's just that aspect of you need to know where it is. And to do that, you need to be watching your environment. You need to understand, you know, you need to visualize not just your outcome in 6 months' time. Yes, you need to visualize that, but also be able to have a visualization of how your application and infrastructure is working with your customers. And that then allows you to have the insight to understand where the constraints are and where you need to take actions. And of course, then you want to be able to take the action. So that aspect of sort of visualize, insight, taking action, that's what we're about. That's what's needed right now, is to do that as quickly as possible. And I come to something I want to step back and to the accelerate for a second is
Sure.
What we'll have to accelerate is your aspect of even sort of selecting and implementing the solutions. So the final piece on the visualize is to look at is to make sure that you look at the product in the right way. Now, normally, if you don't have some of the things that I just described, if you don't have a product in place today, and you're thinking, hang on, I've got a lot of things on my plate, but yes, I need that thing as well. The question becomes, again, like the 2-year strategy to 3 months is, perhaps you would normally take 3 or 4 months to evaluate products and make the decision and work out how to do the purchase orders and do those things. You need to sort of talk to your vendor, talk to us, AppDynamics, about how you can accelerate that entire process to realize straight away what the value is in your environment. Unfortunately, for the next couple of months, you know, there is just a lot of pressure of the companies that do this well, the companies that accelerate now are going to come out of this curve way ahead of the other companies. Something like, you know, and a lot of those companies won't make it. That's the real shame of it. So they're the sort of 3 things. Address your immediate needs, obviously. Accelerate your strategy. You can't sit on your hands. And then make sure that you have a clear visualization of your environment, of the outcome, of what your environment looks like in 6 months' time. Sound good?
Totally. Yeah. It's almost like the visualization or knowledge kind of builds that proactivity, and is starting to build that proactive approach if you haven't already. And folks should definitely look at the resources we've dropped in the resource center, as I mentioned earlier, for more information on that. You'll find some good advice for IT teams and example use cases so you can see for yourself what that visualization looks like. Cool. Thank you, Marco. Well, this takes us to the Q&A portion of the session. So we'll answer as many as we can in the next 15 minutes or so. We have a few in the queue, but feel free to continue submitting any questions you can think of, and we'll definitely connect with you after this session if we don't get to it. All right, so let's get started.
Absolutely. Well, I'll make sure we answer all the questions like offline afterwards if we don't get to them. Just while we're waiting for you said you had a few, but just as the questions are coming in, sort of thing. I will say, go to our blog. I've written a couple of pieces. Some people even smarter than me have written a couple of pieces around how to work out, you know, to staff, you know, how to work out the skills you need in your team, how to address, you know, slowdowns, which are the new outage, how to build out AI ops, artificially intelligent operations in your environment, and they give you some good guides and steps of what to go through to prepare for that. So I'll just throw that out there of like the blog has some really nice content if you just want to take the time and read it.
That's a good shout out.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, questions. So we've got, what about getting approval for new investments when no one is around?
So that's a good thing. So the challenge with that, as anybody who's run a data center knows, is that there's sort of two sides to that. One is getting executive approval, management approval for the investment. The other side is actually getting the process to run. So the first one is around, how can you reduce the initial investment? How can you get it below certain thresholds? And actually, our parent company, Cisco, has a really good offer out there right now of like deferring payments. People don't want to necessarily spend the money right now. They need that money for day-to-day operations. But they're okay to accept the commitment to make that investment for a year away. And Cisco Finance is helping customers meet those needs by allowing you to pay small amounts up front and pay off the rest of it as you use the technology over the coming few years, depending on the nature of the deal. So I'll throw that out there of like, how do you get approval for it? Well, the first one is, look for companies that have made it easier for you, that are staggering the payments so that you can stay in business today. And then the second one is about also look for where you can buy from existing vendors. So, it might be that you've already bought security or networking or something from Cisco, where you can also buy, application performance management from Cisco through those Cisco deals. And that just smooths the way through the purchase order process and so on, because the vendors already exist on your books. That might be a little detail for the techies out there, of just like, I've been on both sides of the fence, and I understand that smoothing the waters for finance is just as important as getting the feature match right.
Cool. How many enterprises will fail after the pandemic, or whatever it is?
Let me get my crystal ball out. The answer here, some definitely will. I'm going to estimate about 1 in 20, maybe even down to 1 in 10. And the thing that makes that number so high is that there are a number of businesses in certain industries that were already under stress. The retail industry was facing some of its own challenges. Some of those mid-sized enterprise industries they're going to have trouble getting through surviving through this to get to the other side. So I think that, my estimate is somewhere between 1 in 20 and 1 in 10. I think enterprises will fail out of this. Again, the ones that survive are the ones that will continue to, they will focus on accelerating out of the corner. And that's a driving reference. I don't know if you've ever raced bikes or cars, but, the thing is, you break into the corner and you accelerate out of it. It's the only way to win the race.
Okay. I got laid off. How does this advice help?
Well, first off, I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sure you're not alone. That's the first thing. In the IT world right now, it's a pretty hot market, and still a hot market. And definitely, I will tell you, Cisco is hiring. AppDynamics is hiring. So come to our websites, look for those positions that match your needs, and then whether it's us or somebody else that you go to, I would go in with that I come back to that acceleration mindset. When you're going through the process, go in there with the attitude of, I'm not here to help you survive this. I'm not here to fill a desk. I'm here to accelerate you out of this dramatic moment in time. I'm here to drive you into the future and work out how you personally, how your skill sets do that. So that would be my advice once you hit that. Work out how to describe what you do as an accelerating factor for the company you wish to join. And good luck.
Yes, good luck, for sure. Work takes time to be completed. How can a 2-year plan become a 3-month plan? Great question.
Well, I just said that it did, so it must be true. Sorry. So, it is a challenge. And I think that, as I say, it's about smoothing the way. So, number one, you have to get everybody on board to accept that this is the change that the company wants to make. We want that 2-year strategy to be a 3-month strategy. And then it's about working out and having each team go away and work out how can we make it faster? And this isn't about cutting corners. So I'm not saying don't test a new application. Still test it. I'm not saying, still meet all your compliance needs, whether legal or internal. Still make those things happen. But can you automate? Can you create faster feedback loops in the meantime? Is there a way of going for this application? Let's break out of our existing thinking and the long steps we used to take, and we're going to work out if it's working immediately from measuring the revenue that is the transactions that are running on, by measuring the response times the application is giving. We're going to make sure it works by delighting our customer in a particular way. So it's about smoothing in each area. So as I say, and don't just think tech. Yes, it's about getting the right tools and putting them in straight away and making the decision quickly rather than a sort of a long convoluted process that might take 6 months to decide on a single product. No, just put the product in, run it for a bit, see how, and use it. And then work out, okay, is this our 5-year product or our 1-month product? Similarly, in finance, smooth the way. Let them know that what's coming at them. Give them in advance, roll them into the conversation. Similarly with the business needs, don't waste your time building things that the business doesn't really want, that the customers don't really want. Focus on that aspect of it, of how you get it ready. So I think it's each team looking at it in that way and accepting the guidance of, we're going to do this in 3 months. How can we make it easier for you? And I come back to, that's exactly what every government around the world right now is asking of their government is, can you solve some problems for us? And we need to solve them faster than we normally would because of the urgency. So again, but like the prior answer, good luck.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Our competition got a lot of new users during this, and we're wondering, how do we get them back?
Okay, so
tricky one.
How are you to get them back? Well, how do you keep them, I guess, is the answer of how do you turn them into full customers? The question of load is an interesting one. And having a moment that can bring you a massive growth is a double-edged sword. What we see is, so I'll use a quick example of, I'll start with WebEx. Over on the other side of the company, Cisco has a WebEx function, and they saw massive growth. And they had lots and lots of new users who'd never used the product before, and they were like, okay, well, they needed a bit of help. They were calling into support. So Cisco put the call out across the company, the beauty of being a major company of, hey, we just need people to kind of take level 1 support calls from these folks, just to explain where on the screen to click. Can somebody help us? And various volunteers in the company suddenly moved from whatever they were to become level 1 support for a few days while we got through that bubble. So how do you keep all those customers? Zoom's experience was different. They had the massive growth. And unfortunately, what it revealed was, that some of the security issues that they were facing, and it turned into a reputation problem for them. That what was immediately a fantastic reputation, the media is now a slightly tainted one. These are the sort of plus and minus sides of these things. So getting all those customers can be a double-edged sword. The thing is that if your competition won those guys and now you want them back, it's to focus on, well, what's the next step down the road? Don't focus on sort of necessarily beating the competition. I don't know. If everybody went to the competition because of feature X, don't spend all your time building feature X. Build feature X plus 1. Work out, okay, well, they're there now. Where will they want to be in 3 months' time? Let's build that feature so that we can win those customers back from the competition at that point in time. X plus 1.
Great idea. Cool. This person already has APM in place and wonders, what else can I do?
So congratulations on having application performance management in place. I would say explore, look, recently in this area, and in particular in our product, there have been some new features added in that significantly extend what APM can do. There's always the sort of traditional monitoring of just, what infrastructure is being used for what. And then, we changed the marketplace with Business IQ of relating that infrastructure and those transactions from an IT perspective to a business perspective so that you could go, this is the transaction I care about. Okay, here are the pieces that support that transaction. But on top of that, we're now it's the thing of, if you think about scale, then that's effective. but you also want to understand how the code is running. You want to be able to solve problems in production as quickly as humanly possible. So, some of the features, we've added deep code insight, for example. And with deep code insight, you can now examine a running production environment and set, feature flags, basically. So set watch points. So in coding, you set a breakpoint, and when your code hits that point, it stops dead so that you can sort of see where it got up to. You don't want to do that in production, right? Because it would stop everything. Instead, with DCI, you can set watch points in there. So in a dynamically running environment, when it hits that particular, wherever you set the watch point, it will sort of just spit out a little bit of data for you and tell you where the code is so that you can understand why a particular piece of code is running in a particular way in production without having to go back and rebuild the entire product and then push it out into production and wait for the problem, the constraint to happen again and then sort of looking at some logs or something like that. You can just do it dynamically in production. And it's even smart enough to switch itself off because, once a developer has seen where their error is or what their issue is, they tend to then go straight to fixing it and forget to switch off the sort of the monitoring piece. It'll switch itself off. So there's never a significant overhead. So if you're running APM today, make sure you're exporting the full power of it. Look at Business IQ, look at Deep Code Insight. These things can change. These are the sorts of things that will accelerate you out of that corner.
Okay. Why are languages like COBOL still in use? Did I pronounce that right?
So COBOL. Everyone calls it COBOL. Common something business-oriented language. Common business-oriented language, COBOL. Why are they still in use? Well, when we looked at the four, I can't think of the phrase we used, but the four paradigms that we've gone through in computing, the first one was mainframe. And the simple thing is that COBOL is still in use. You might have seen some headlines around, in New Jersey, they were looking for COBOL programmers because because unemployment systems were so heavily overloaded, they were breaking and they couldn't scale them. And the thing is, these have been reliable systems for a number of years. What they weren't adjusted for was immediate scale. Why is it still in use? I think it's 95% of your ATM transactions still run on COBOL when you go and take money out of a cash machine. There's some COBOL code in the back running that because it works, because it's fast, because people are used to it and they didn't want to change it if they didn't have to. What they've hit in some places now, it's the thing of technical debt. You're always balancing technical debt. And you need to understand the code that supports your transaction. What they run into now is this massive sudden scale need. And mainframes don't scale in that way. They're powerful enough, but when you need sort of twice the scalability, you need to buy a second mainframe. That you can't do that overnight. And that's why everyone's moving into the fourth paradigm of cloud and microservices, where when that boom comes, we can just move straight away. But it doesn't change that basic challenge that you need to understand, what parts of the performance in your environment and infrastructure are supporting that transaction so that you can make sure that customer experience, that beautiful customer experience, is as powerful as it can possibly be. So, yeah, we still have COBOL. We'll probably still have it for another, another 15, 20 years. They'll probably still be running COBOL. That's the sort of tech debt that we have.
Okay. We are under a hiring freeze and our team is overloaded. How to also get ready for acceleration?
So that's a good challenge. Great question. I think so here's the problem. You have people and they're already overloaded. You have to let them know that it's not always going to be like this. You have to let them know that while they're delivering, while you're asking a lot of them right now, it's not pointless. It's not just like you're asking a lot of them right now and then at some point we just go back to normal. Who cares? You want them to be able to see the exit point, communicate the vision of what you have. That's why I was just talking about visualizing not just the technology and the customer experience, but visualizing where you want to be in 6 months' time as well. What company do you want to be? Major companies, Disney is changing, is reflecting right now on how they're going to get people back into the parks. Not, how they can be the leader in that space of getting people back into environments. Companies have to think about the company that will be in 6 months' time from now and how to reflect that. If you can communicate to your teams that vision so they realize they're not just overworked right now for no significant benefit. They're overworked right now to get over a particular hump, but it's also a strategic direction. I think that's sort of the answer. Like, if you've got a hiring freeze, you can't get more people in, you've got to have people working on the right things. It's got to support where you want to be in 6 months' time.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. So when you say visualize the outcome, do you mean the tool or the team?
Okay, so good. Yes, I mean both. You want to visualize. This is again, I come back to this basic premise. This is a challenging moment in history, and probably all of us at some stage will experience, grief, and we'll have issues with it. On the same boat, it is an opportunity as well. And the appropriate response is, as I say, always to take care of the immediate needs and make sure people are safe and comfortable, but also be thinking about the strategy for the future. So, I mean the team, because if you were thinking, we're all split into these silos and I really wanted to be DevOps, now is the time to focus on changing that. Now is the time to architect, well, what tools would help us do that quickly? If you were a retail storefront business and you wanted to be a digital business, well, now is the time to obviously accelerate that survival mechanism of the digital storefront and to have everyone focused on how you're going to scale that as the customers come in and how you're going to measure your success as you go forward. So yes, the team, and making sure you have, this is a time when people can learn new skills. They might have a bit of spare, if they're not overloaded, they might have some spare cycles to learn about DevOps, to learn about site reliability engineering, to learn about new APM functions like Deep Code Insight, to learn about extended functions like Business IQ, to take those things. So I think that's the critical outcome here. When yes, it's the tool, and yes, it's the team. It's actually both. You want to visualize how the business looks, in 3-6 months in the future, so that you can get there, and also so you can measure your success. That's important as well. You don't want to get there and go, well, this was fun and I think it worked. You want to work out what success looks like so that you can measure it. And of course, that requires something that is collecting all the metrics and information out of your environment.
Cool. Great. Yeah, I think that's all we have time for right now. Again, we'll be sure to follow up with you later if we didn't get to your question. And this session will also be available to view on demand. So we'll send that to everyone as soon as it's available. But yeah, thank you, Marco. That was awesome. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please do get in touch with us. You can find us at appdynamics.com. Or you can follow Marco on Twitter at Marco Coulter if you have any other questions. We'll definitely follow up with you. And yeah, most importantly, please look after yourselves and know that you don't have to go this alone. Just a reminder to check out the resource links in the Resource Center widget on the right side of your screen. There's some helpful information in there specifically geared towards maintaining business performance at this time. So I definitely encourage you to take advantage of that support if you need it. Just note that once we end this webinar, the screen will refresh and just show a survey. So I recommend clicking through to the resources you need just in case you lose them. And finally, if you liked this session, we'd love for you to join us for the next episode of Shifting Left. I'll be joined by AppDynamics Product Marketing Manager Gina Na, and we'll be speaking specifically to DevOps and how teams can maintain speed and quality while also managing an unprecedented surge in demand. So stay tuned for more info on that. And thanks again, Marco, and to everyone who joined us.
Thanks very much, AJ. Thanks, everyone, for your time.